Hello, sexy people. This is Jackie here with another episode of the Sexy Politico podcast. I'm here on Inauguration Day 2021, here to celebrate Joe Biden being inaugurated as our nation's 46th president at 12 o'clock noon. Now, because of such a momentous occasion, I would like to take a look at Inauguration Day, inauguration ceremonies of historical significance, and just to have some historical perspective as we come into an inauguration that is going to be surrounded by, 25,000 National Guards members? That this isn't the first time that this has happened where inaugurations have been almost under siege. But if we're going to start with inaugurations, let's start with the very first one. George Washington was first inaugurated on April 4th, 1790. He was inaugurated at the temporary capital of New York City. Now, the inauguration ceremony is to mark the beginning of a new 4-year term. So the president is inaugurated every 4 years as opposed to being inaugurated at the beginning of each term that he or hopefully one day she has. Now, who was the first president to be inaugurated in Washington, D.C.? That would be Thomas Jefferson, who was inaugurated in D.C. once it was chosen as the permanent capital. And he rode a horse-drawn carriage from the Capitol to the president's house. And this music and spontaneous gathering is what it has molded and been shaped into what is now today's inaugural parade. But an inauguration is only mandated in the Constitution to have two things. Just has president say an oath with a judge. The oath is specifically laid out in the Constitution, and that's it. Everything else is for show. The 20th Amendment changed the date that the president takes office. So, since the passage of the 20th Amendment, the date that the president takes office is January 20th at noon Eastern Standard Time. Now, that is, if that date falls on a Sunday, then those presidents have had private swearing-in ceremonies, and then a public one on the 21st. So, that is why, historical fun fact, President Obama has been sworn in 4 times. The first time he was sworn in, Chief Justice John Roberts flubbed his lines, and so he had another private swearing-in ceremony just to make sure it stuck. Then, for Obama's second term, the 20th fell on a Sunday, so he was sworn in privately on that Sunday and then had the public inauguration the 21st. When did all the balls and the glitz and the glamour and all of the singing megastars and all of that stuff really start coming into the Inauguration Day celebration? Well, there were balls even in George Washington's time. George Washington was recorded as having a waltz at a ball to celebrate the new president. There have been parades since Thomas Jefferson. What really changes a lot of things is the advent of motion picture and the advent of television, and basically turning this into a bit of a ratings bonanza. But also, what the inauguration does is it signals to the American people what is important to this president. So when you have a president that has Lady Gaga singing at his inauguration, it says something different than when a president has Kid Rock singing at their inauguration. What each of those artists stand for is a representation of what that president stands for himself. I wish I could say herself, but we haven't had a female president yet, so sorry, I'm not using gender neutral pronouns. Now, this inauguration ceremony for Joe Biden is interesting in the fact that so much of the ceremony around Kamala Harris is being broadcast, and people really care about who's giving Kamala Harris her oath of office, which is Justice Sonia Sotomayor, because she is the first female vice president, and her husband will take up the moniker the second gentleman. And the news outlets and everything are just, it's a story. But normally people don't really pay any mind to the vice president on Inauguration Day, because it's not really about the vice president. It's about the president taking over, taking the keys and having a peaceful transition of power to a new administration. Thomas Jefferson taking over in 1801 was a watershed moment in the United States, because power transferred peacefully from one political party to another, and that's the first time that has ever happened. And while John Adams, the president who preceded Thomas Jefferson, was a bit of a baby and decided to leave the night before the inauguration and not hang out, the power of the presidency was peacefully transferred from one party to another, and it has done so for the entirety of this nation. And this is why the Capitol riots were so jarring, it's hard for me to even talk about how much it feels like an actual violation to the democracy that I believe so strongly in, that these people would try to subvert an election. But I mean, our country was able to transfer power on an election day, even when a civil war was happening. Literally, when Abraham Lincoln was elected, nobody tried to shoot him then. Nobody tried to take over on election day then. Lincoln took over, he was inaugurated, he tried for peace, and a month later the states all started leaving, the war started, but he was inaugurated. But as we move forward, it's going to be very interesting to see where everything goes and what the inauguration is going to look like in 2021, with all of the additional security and COVID protocols that will be happening. So, as we're looking forward to this inauguration, let's look at some fun facts. So, Dolly Madison was the first lady to attend an inauguration, since, women weren't really considered important back then. And it took until 1965, when Lady Bird Johnson held the Bible that the president took the oath of office with, that a president's spouse had anything to do with the inauguration. John Quincy Adams was the first president-elect to wear long pants. Zachary Taylor refused to be inaugurated on a Sunday. So Some even say that there was no president for a day. Franklin Pierce wouldn't swear to faithfully execute the office of President of the United States. He said affirm, because there are some religions that don't believe to swear an oath of any sort. James Buchanan announced in his inaugural address he wouldn't run for re-election, that it was cold during Ulysses S. Grant's inauguration, and the champagne and canaries froze. Top hats used to be a big old trend, and the last president to wear a top hat at their inauguration was John F. Kennedy. Theodore Roosevelt wasn't sworn in on a Bible. He just lifted his hand. Theodore Roosevelt wore one of Abraham Lincoln's rings during his inauguration. Warren G. Harding was the first president-elect to arrive at his inauguration in a car. Calvin Coolidge's dad swore him in as president because when Warren G. Harding died in office, Coolidge was just sworn in at home. He was at home hanging out with his parents. His dad was a notary public, and he just swore him in Vermont, and that way he would be president, and just went real quick. The second time he was sworn in by Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, William Howard Taft. So more fun facts. William Henry Harrison had the longest inaugural address and the shortest presidency because he spoke for nearly 2 hours, caught pneumonia, and died because it was 1841. While the president with the shortest inaugural address was actually George Washington's first inaugural, which was 135 words. Could fit in a tweet now. Now, Franklin Roosevelt, who was elected president 4 times, decided to skip the parade for his 4th inaugural. Been there, done that. Got the tea. But also there was a war going on, and there wasn't actual extra stuff to have a parade with. Now, Harry Truman's second inauguration was the first televised inaugural ceremony. And Lyndon B. Johnson was the first and only president who's ever been sworn in on an airplane, and that is sadly because when JFK was assassinated, LBJ wanted to show the country that there was still this continuity, even though their president had just been martyred. So he was sworn in as soon as he could be after President Kennedy died. So there are a lot of traditions that happen. There are a lot of weird things that happen at presidential inaugurations and the day of. Now, as I teased a little bit, the big block of cheese. What is that about? So Andrew Jackson's big block of cheese. I had been told in school that Andrew Jackson had one hell of an inauguration party where basically invited the public in, and all these people came in and they were drinking and all this stuff, and basically what the staff did was they threw a bunch of wine and a big block of cheese out onto the front lawn to get people out of the White House. Well, partially true. Did have one hell of an inauguration party. All they did was they put the wine out in the front yard. The big block of cheese is a whole different thing. So what happened with the big block of cheese? The real tea is that Andrew Jackson, at that time, he was given a big old block of cheese. He wasn't the first president to be given a big block of cheese. Thomas Jefferson was. But when Andrew Jackson got this big block of cheese, he didn't know what to do with it. So he just kind of left it in the front room of the White House for 2 years. Which, I mean, hey, cheese ages, tastes pretty well. And then after a couple years, he just invited the public over to eat it, and it was gone in 2 hours, but stank the place up to high heavens. So, at the end of the day, the big block of cheese had absolutely nothing to do with the inauguration, and so, my bad in believing myth. But, anyway, That is the end of this episode, Sexy Politico podcast. Happy Inauguration Day, and I wish all the best for President Biden and Vice President Harris, and look forward to seeing what comes next with them. Thank you for listening. If you would like to leave a suggestion for the Sexy Political podcast, please do so in any of our social medias. Please leave a rating for us with your friends, families, enemy, I don't care. And tell people what you think. And if you want to support us, we do have a Patreon. Thank you so much for listening. Stay sexy, stay safe, stay sane. Bye.